the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. And today, I've been talking about this sumo thing for a while, and I actually was writing a book about it, and I had all kinds of texts I generated, hours of it, and for some reason AI lost it. I had it entered into artificial intelligence, and they were very nice about it in a sterile way that a computer can be, Oh, sorry, we lost it all, which is unbelievable. They lost half of it. Anyway, I think it was a good thing, because it gave me an opportunity to rethink how I would say it. And I'm still in the process here. I'm still learning a lot about the internal arts. But what they say is that, the doors aren't the room. And when you learn this process, I don't care if it's whatever it is, Tai Chi or microcosmic orbit or whatever, there are different doorways, but the doorways aren't the room. And after you find your way through it and get into the room, particularly when you've been doing these practices for a long enough time, you forget, you don't even remember the doorways, because you're in the room. And so they say that that's one of the advantages from learning from someone as they are learning, is because those essential doorways are front and center. And even, how long have I been doing this? Not that long, but I'm already kind of having to write down the doorways to try to remember, because I do want to be able to relate them to people in the future. And so we're going to take another run at it here. And, where it leads, what we're talking about, and I've discussed this briefly in the past, but we're talking about how the physiology, how to move. Really, it's about proper movement through space. And what that's about, it's about the integration of the central nervous system with the muscles, but it's through what in the ancient Chinese, the internal arts, they referred to as the silk web. And they talk about silk reeling. And the silk maps onto, the silk is, I think we can say with complete confidence, that it's the fascial planes. All of these fascia going through the whole body, and that's the interface between the central nervous system and the muscles. In the West, we think about physical conditioning, and we think about muscles, building muscles, working your muscles, getting your muscles strong and healthy. And really, it's more about the fascia. If the fascia is healthy and strong, then the muscles follow. But to try to develop the muscles without developing the fascia properly it's a mistake, A lot of times. What's that, Scott?
Nothing.
Oh. A lot of times, we think we have like a knot in our muscle. That's really a snag in the fascial plane, in that area, snags. And so opening that is more about, even though we think, got to pound out the knots in the muscle, it's more about the fascia. And so there's a whole different approach to that, and it tends to be more subtle. We can get into that. That's a whole other thing, a whole other podcast. But really what we're talking about here is the art of movement. And now if you study a lot of the different internal arts, be it Qigong or Tai Chi or whatever, or Dhanurveda, it's very easy to take that as an external art. Go through this motion and do this and like that. And even, there are masters there that I have tremendous respect for. Like I remember, this was even back in the early 80s, there's a guy named Montauk Chi. he wrote books, I read a few of them. I think Iron Shirt Qigong, I think was one. And I remember he talked about the muscle meridians. I thought that was huge. I've lectured on that in my classes. And he talked about, showed the different lines, and then he talked about spirals. And a lot of that I related to in different ways to a different extent. And then even you see these guys that have been doing Qigong or whatever, or Tai Chi or whatever, for decades, and they'll call it an internal art. But I find it interesting that, okay, this is an internal art, if you watch their videos, and here's how you do it. And then they go right to the external, move this way, do this. And so that's just an overlay, that's just approaching from the surface. And so the real art of learning the internal arts, which is, we're talking about here, the very thing that integrates the central nervous system with the muscles through the fascia, making the fascia healthy. We're talking about healthy physiology here. Because the whole musculoskeletal system, and the fascia runs through everything, not just the muscles. It runs through the bones, it runs through all the organs. If the fascia is healthy, the body is healthy, And so the question becomes, how do you cultivate that without it just being an overlay, like a microcosmic orbit, it's just another example. There are different things they had to learn, or even I'll talk about the silk web, which is the fascial planes, and they have little ancient diagrams showing how that swirls around the body and through the body and stuff. But that can't be learned as an overlay. It has to be found from within. When I taught hands-on healing, it was an interesting thing because you give a lecture and you teach the techniques, and then I'd go table to table, and they'd be trying to do it, as an overlay, which is understandable, But to give them that experience, and I'd say it different ways, and I'd maybe put my hand on their hand when they were working on somebody and kind of take the energy and it was beautiful, really, because when it finally became internalized, when they finally found it from within, the light bulb went off. And a very common thing they would say to me after that aha experience, they said, well, why didn't you say it that way in the beginning? And of course, each person would be a different way I said it. And it wasn't about what I said. It was about, they keep knocking on heaven's door, right? They keep exploring until all of a sudden they find it within themselves, which is a beautiful moment. And the thing is, what's the uniqueness there? How's that differ from reading it in a book and trying to mimic it? It's the actual experience. And so where do you get that experience from? Well, one thing I discovered lately, and I got into it in a funny kind of a way, because, I'm 75 years old, and it's going to be another 20 years at least before we really complete everything I want to get done on Mount Sumo before I'm ready to go. And so I thought I better, really focus on my health and take care of my health. So I got back into lifting weights and resistance training and all that. And one thing led to the next. I started doing deadlifts, then I found out about sumo deadlifts, and then when I was doing sumo deadlifts, I was watching, my two favorite teachers, if you will, on sumo deadlifts are Natasha Agi and Steffi Cohen. I don't think they'd even necessarily consider themselves teachers, but little comments and things they'd make here and there, and how it would map onto the energetic thing, but in a very pragmatic and a very physical way. Like, I think it was Steffi that said, the floor does the lift. And that relates directly really to the internal arts from the ancient Chinese. It's not about effort. In fact, it's effortless. It's the earth that does the lift through the body. And how does it do that? You start exploring that. And and they don't even talk about energy, a lot of them. Energy, that's just hocus pocus. We're talking about physical body, we're talking about fascial planes here, not, you know, silk reeling, they call it. And so it becomes a very pragmatic approach that maps beautifully onto and keeps it really grounded. But now, the problem with, as I see it, the problem with just basic movement, you know, Qigong Tai Chi, is it's very easy to mimic the movement, but there's no test there. Nothing's really testing whether or not that's really what you're doing, which is what I really liked about sumo deadlifting. This is just my personal experience. What I really want you to get from this isn't sumo deadlifting, it's more about finding it in your own way, your own path, to cultivate this healthy function of the physiology, really. But it's about, you see, the beauty of sumo deadlifting is that there's a test there. You can't fake it. You can't just go through the motion, because the weight is the test. And if you're not doing it properly, you know right away, because you can't do the lift, or you hurt a muscle, or you hurt your back, or whatever. So there's an immediate feedback there. And then you learn. And all different doorways come up, all different things. And I talked about that where I would do with the triangles, and you know, the feet, the back, the shoulders, and then back to the feet, you know, the earth through the bar, like that. And then another triangle was, you know, the hands to the, which was the lower abdomen, because in the physical they talk about in the West they talk about, you know, bringing the bar to the belly, you know, and keeping it close and like that. And I remember then that's the hara, you know, the hara, the lower abdomen. And they talk about filling the basin, you know, creating a pressure in there, but it's a comfortable pressure. It's not, in the West they talk about just tightening everything up and really tightening up the abdomen and getting it really solid, and the lats have to be tight, everything has to be tight. You're dead different there. In the ancient teachings, be it Dhanurveda, which is Vedic, or be it ancient internal arts from China, they talk about being effortless. Completely the opposite. The one, the muscles are trying to do it, and the other, the fascial planes, are just functioning harmoniously. And it's incredible how harmoniously functioning they can become if this thing is cultivated properly. There's a guy, you can just decide if you want to believe this or not, I don't know what I think, but his name is Dr. Wang, W-A-N-G. Search him on YouTube, you'll find him. And there's one video of him in particular, as he's doing a demo, and he's, you know, completely effortlessly, just a little motion, and well, people are coming at him with sticks and stuff, and he just goes like that, and they fall over, and you know, whole groups of people, and he just does hardly anything, and they're all just falling on the ground. And it's not an aggressive thing at all, it's just an effortless flowing, it's actually kind of beautiful to watch. It's not like you're fighting somebody, you know. But that's, to whatever extent this is applicable, the fundamental understanding is valid. It's remarkable. The strength. See, strength doesn't come from the muscles. It comes from the fascial fabric, the silk web, they call it in the ancient Chinese. And then they go through different steps how to do that. And it's beautiful how Dhanurveda, if you're interested, you can look up Spanda, Spanda phases, S-P-A-N-D-A phases of Dhanurveda. And the steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. And they apply it now. Dhanurveda applies, mostly it's archery. And a lot of people you talk to Dhanurveda, oh, that's for fighting, that's for warfare. I guess they say the same thing about internal arts. A lot of people go to internal martial arts. Well, that's one level of understanding of it. But really it's about proper motion, how to move, how the body is designed to move. I remember when I was teaching, I started with this when I was teaching hands-on healing, and I started teaching being, merging, knowing, and doing. And the reason I did that is because first you have to get settled in your own being. That maps right into Dhanurveda and also into the ancient internal arts. You get established in your own being. And that might even be taking a few breaths, get settled, whatever. Breath is another thing I could talk about. But anyway, and so that's being. First you get established in your own being. And then you merge. In hands-on healing, you put your hand on a chakra or whatever, just feel it, just feel it. People have lost their ability to feel it, really, unless it's extreme emotions, radical. Watch movies and see. It's all about listening extreme emotions. Whereas the subtle feelings are so profound and so beautiful. Not even emotional, really. But that's the process with hands-on healing or with sumo deadlifting or with anything. Archery. It's about merging with what you're doing. You merge with the person's body, the chakras. You merge with the bar. You merge with the geometry. Geometry is a very important concept. There's proper geometry, proper structure, proper ways that the body moves, and that's why they do this Tai Chi stuff. But to really do it properly, it has to come from inside, not as an overlay. So, and that's the process of merging, you see. You really get into the geometry of the thing, the structure of the thing, how the body is designed to be. So it's being and then merging. From the merging, and there's a beautiful moment in sumo, and it's in everything, it's in archery, it's all this, but from the merging comes the knowing. At some point, and with sumo, going through the motion, aren't I here? With sumo, you get over the bar, you grab it on the bar, you get into the position, like a horse stance really, and at one point there's like this knowing. You just know it. Not because you're trying to figure it out intellectually, but because you merge through it. From the being comes the merging, from the merging comes the knowing, and you know. And then from the knowing, once you know, once you click into that moment, where all the alignment and everything is just right, and the channels that open, everything is flowing, then the doing is automatic. In fact, they even say that you don't lift the bar. The earth lifts the bar, it lifts itself. It's spontaneous, and this is right out of Dhanurveda. The lifting happens secondary to being, merging, knowing, and then the doing just happens. And that was one thing with anything you learn, archery, hands-on healing, you name it. People want to jump to the doing. How do I do that? And I used to say, no, it's not. Doing, those are just techniques. And everyone would come to me wanting to learn this technique and that technique. It's not about the techniques. When you're being, merge, and know, then the techniques just happen spontaneously. Now there are the doors that kind of hint, point in the direction, but ultimately it's about getting into the room. And what we're talking about here is the process of doing that is being, merging, knowing, and then doing. As described in Dhanurveda, the phases of Spanda. And I don't know much about archery at all, but they'll go through those same steps. Also, it maps onto this idea of root. I came up with this when it was, and it just, I pulled it all out from all these different sources. But when you do a deadlift or when you do anything, first you root, and they'll talk about root, you just plant your feet, you're solid on the ground. Different models have different perspectives. Some of them say, pretend like you're running roots all the way down to the center of the earth. And then there's a lot of the Western practitioners think that's a bunch of hocus pocus, and you just plant your feet on the ground, you know. But the earth lifts the bars, I'll say, and things like that. And so first you root, and then you align. See, now we're getting into merging. You let the physiology align, and there are all sorts of doorways for that, aren't there? About how to place your feet, how the legs should be, keep the back, you know, straight, yada yada. And so all these different things, and so you start to align with the proper position. But then what happens? And I'm talking about that moment again. What happens when you do this? All of a sudden it kind of clicks in, where the physiology, the inner knowing of the physiology takes over. And then the body just opens. And you can feel it. It's like it just opened. And from that open, then they use the word drive. I don't really like the word drive because there's too much effort involved. And when I say they, I wrote about this, and people came back with me about using the word drive. And anyway, we could say effortless drive. The lift just happens. You don't do the lift. You do being, merging, and knowing, and then the doing just happens. You see, the lift just happens. So all of this, and the beauty about, what I like about sumo deadlifts is if you're not doing it properly, you get immediate feedback. The bar won't rise, you hurt your back, you whatever. And what this all does is it organizes. See, we're talking largely about parasympathetic when we talk about the nervous system and fascia, whereas the muscles, you could say, are more sympathetic, you know, more active like that. And it's all about organizing. Calm means organized. When the physiology is calm, it's not limp, it's organized. That's a beautiful concept if you think about it. And so once you have parasympathetic organization, then whatever you're doing, your movement becomes healthy, becomes in harmony with nature, your own nature, the nature of your own physiology. So it's all about really learning how to move. See, that one thing they teach a lot in internal arts is the horse stance. I think most everybody's heard of the horse stance, you know. It's the initial position, really, minus the bar. So it's the initial position of doing a deadlift. You know, the legs are out, and you'll see, look up horse stance if you don't know what it is on YouTube, you'll see it. You'll find it everywhere. But the thing about doing just the horse stance, which is great, I'm not knocking it. I mean, I am no internal arts master, believe me. I'm learning this stuff. But the thing about the horse stance is that it's a frozen position, which is fine. But one thing I like about sumo is then what's happening is it's a geometry, right, of the physiology of the body. But with sumo, you're going through a continuum of different structures. And each of those structures has a proper geometry to it. So it becomes a geometry continuum. And the idea then is that if you can maintain the geometry, then from an Eastern perspective, the energy flows. From a Western perspective, you could say that the fascial planes stay healthy, they don't snag, everything's good, and the whole movement happens. So it's really, the real internal arts aren't about frozen position ultimately, but they're about the art of movement. How to move without having the fascial planes snag, keeping the integration of mind and body, the central nervous system, and the muscles. And in the West, when we think about it, when we talk about exercise, it's largely about muscles, and that's why people are, you know, tearing rotator cuffs, and because the focus is in the wrong place, you know. In the East, largely they use very light weights. And that's fine, it's good, and you can cultivate it all. Personally, I think once you do that, once you get the movement down, then it's natural to use heavier weights, but that's another subject, you know. Calm then doesn't mean limp, it means organized. And so what we're doing here is cultivating the state of calm. And if we can do that and move through different geometric structures, then it's effortless. Movement becomes effortless. Moving the bar becomes effortless. The whole thing is effortless. Whereas isn't it amazing how in bodybuilding it's the opposite, you know? Grit your teeth, tighten up all your muscles, force it. It's not about force. It's a beautiful knowledge, you know? Let me see if I had anything up here in these notes. The Dhanurveda has this one phrase that I like. It's about the power of arising, power of moving. Power is arising, power is moving when the geometry is recognized as safe. You see, if you're in a position and the geometry isn't right, the central nervous system says danger, danger, no. And you stop. So a lot of times, if you're trying to move a weight, the reason you can't move that weight isn't because you don't have the muscular strength, but because the geometry is not right, and so the central nervous system shuts it down and says no. And that gets all into the Golgi organs that I talked about in the tendons. Once the central nervous system says no, there is things where the tendon meets the muscle called Golgi organs. And when they shut down, they're the thing that shuts it down. There's the thing where you can't move that bar anymore, even if it's a lighter weight than you were just moving. Because once the Golgi organs say no, then it's no. And that stays like that for 72 hours. So if you overtrain or if you lift too much, better to lift less than your max than to try to lift your max. Because if you trigger those Golgi organs, it's 72 hours before they calm down enough where you can really do that exercise again, or make that movement again. And this is true even if we're talking about getting up from a chair, you know? And then the hara, speaking of getting up from a chair, the hara is subtle. And they talk about the basin, the pelvic floor, and the abdomen. It's not about tightening, it's about resting into that. And when you do that and move from that place, and it's almost like a conscious interface with the physical, you know. And when you do that, you get to this point, and almost like the hara, you can feel it almost shift. And then the whole, and from a Western perspective, what are we talking about here? All the fascial planes are connected to, all the fascial planes meet in that area, but they're meeting there without tension, but they're meeting there with the harmony. And that's called well, we did this backwards, didn't I? But that's, you know, that's called closing the gate. But there's also opening the gate, which is, you know, connecting with your feet and having it flow. But then you close the gate. What that's about is containing that state. It is like a containment, but it's not through effort. It's through healthy flow through the fascial planes, through the silk web, you know. And that's what the hara is all about. And all movement, ultimately, it comes from the hara. Why? Because all the fascial planes, that's where they integrate. So if you're moving your finger, it's integrating with the fascial plane. And when all the fascial planes are in harmony and functioning and integrating through the central nervous system, in that sense, called the hara, the central fascial system, I guess we'd say, then all movements are integrated and harmonious. You know, let's see what else I wanted to. We're getting to the end here of the notes, but this is a whole huge book. And honestly, at this point, I'm not sure I'm even going to write it. I mean, it's so extensive and it's so beautiful. But it was hard, because there's no one place where you can go and pull all this together. You know, you'll read Montauk Chi, or you'll read, you know, Natasha. She doesn't really write books, but watch her and hear what she has to say, or Steffi Coleman, or and you see, it's different. This is why I talk about a reality continuum. There are different realities. I talked about Dr. John Shen, world famous. People would fly in from all over the world just to sit with him and watch him do pulse evaluation. He was a world-renowned Chinese doctor. He and I became close friends. He was a beautiful older man. But I asked him about chakras one time. Here he is, the world famous energy sensor. I mean, this guy was great at sensing energy. I asked him about chakras. You know what he said? There's no such thing. Well, what's that about? See, I think on a superficial level, somebody might hear that and say, oh, this guy can't sense energy. He didn't even think there's such thing as chakras. But we're talking about different realities, and we all enter existence from different levels, from different angles, and take it to different levels. And he was a master of that reality, his reality, that had nothing to do with chakras. And in the West, we talk about fascial planes. In internal arts, they talk about the silk web. Multiple, simultaneously valid, yet contradictory realities. And so pulling all that together and learning from one to the other until what happens, you get into the room. It's not about the door. It's not about which doorway you went through anymore. I remember Dr. Shen and I were at lunch once, and I said to him, I said, Dr. Shen, these people come to you, he's incredible. These people come to you and you take their pulse and give them herbs, but you tell them amazing things. There was just one guy that, this is so extreme, I mean, I don't want to lose my credibility here, but it happened. He told this one guy, he said, in 3 months you're going to have a major trauma, so prepare yourself for it. 3 months later, the stock market crashed, the guy lost everything. And there are different things like that. There's lots of them. And anyway, I said, Dr. Shen, you do all that, and but you never do that for me. When I come see you, you just give me herbs and we talk, and then I go. So what do you see? And so he went like that, and like right from across the lunch table, busy restaurant. And then he told me what he saw. And I said, how do you do that? And you know what he said? This is the point. I don't know. He's in the room, but he can't remember the doors. I remember discovering spirals. You know, you read about the spirals. I think Montauk Chi talked about them, I'm sure he did. And you see the ancient Chinese drawings and how the spirals go through the body. And I, you know, try it as an overlay. What can I feel? Do that? But I remember the time when I found the spirals, and then quickly, or not quickly, but within a few weeks, I guess I translated it into Western science, which is the angular. It's all vectors, and you got angular momentums. Because when energy goes through a knee, for example, it's not a straight line that comes up the leg, through the knee, and up the femur. It's spiraling. It's the different cruciate ligaments and all that, the whole anatomy, and so it's all spiraling. And but by angular momentums, I mean vectors. You know, just like a sailboat. You have the sail here, the boat's here, the boat goes that way. If there's a vector analysis, it's just mathematics, and you see what direction the force is going and all that. And so that vector, it's not the sail, it's not the boat, it's something in between, it's a virtual. And it's an angular momentum, you could say, because as it goes through these joints and stuff, and that's where the spirals come from. So there's a physical, Western perspective, reality to these spirals. And that was huge. That was huge. Um, anyway, Scotty, I think that's enough for one podcast, huh?
Yeah, that was pretty good.
I could, I could go on and on. I'm excited about it now, you know. And we'll see where it leads. We'll see where it leads. Okay, Scotty, so you've taken over the computer stuff, so can you shut us down?
Shutting down.
All right, thanks everybody for listening. We'll talk again next week.